Today we're going to tell you the story about how Rishi and I accidentally became engineers, carpenters, welders and painters, and why that's important to Parkour.
So let's start with what is parkour equipment and where do you get it? To answer the first question, what is parkour equipment? Essentially, these are pieces of equipment that can simulate what you can find outdoors in the real world, but in a controlled environment. Now, this could be something as simple as a piece of wood on the floor, boxes, bars on the wall, wood panels, or elaborate box and bar setups.
So, why do we create parkour obstacles? Historically, parkour was practiced as the art of overcoming obstacles in your environment. And back before the existence of parkour facilities or gyms, people used to practice parkour wherever they could outdoors. So the obstacles became walls, fences, trees, rocks, or really whatever you could find in your locality. But as parkour started reaching a wider audience, there became a need to have a dedicated space where people could come learn it in even more safe and controlled environment and not have to deal with the variability or the risk associated with doing it outdoors. And hence parkour gyms and parkour facilities came about. But what are the obstacles that one would create? So parkour gyms started out simulating the outdoor environment by creating very similar obstacles, which included walls, which included short boxes, also included bars to simulate trees and things to hang on. And from there is where parkour equipment was born. What is the biggest misconception of parkour equipment?
I'd say the biggest misconception about parkour equipment is probably that everything should be made out of foam. Everything should be padded. I think this is the first and biggest fallacy in parkour equipment, seeing as we're trying to simulate the outside world where there is no padding. To then create everything out of soft stuff is probably the worst way you could possibly train parkour.
I think foam has its role where we use it to train really, really young kids like who are not even 6-7 years old, younger than that. And it gives them a certain freedom and safety in initially exploring it. But beyond that, particularly for older kids and adults, we steer them away.
The one place that you could use foam equipment besides young kids is possibly training really sketchy stuff, which has a much higher failure rate, and you'd probably end up in the hospital too many times if you tried to learn this without. But again, besides these two extremes in the learning curve, I think the most majority of people should work more on harder obstacles. So the only places that I can think of that padding is useful is when we're teaching really young kids, or when the adults are working on moves that are too risky to be done without some safety equipment.
Like acrobatics.
When someone walks into Mumbai Movement Academy, what do you want them to feel?
I think they should feel like a crazy sense of surprise and excitement. The ideas that we build with, we want to make it the most elaborate jungle gym they've ever seen. And the feeling should be one that you see in any kind of kid when they look at a jungle gym, which is, I want to run, jump and climb all over that. The reason being that our outdoor environment today just doesn't have any challenges for humans to face their physical weaknesses. And here the entire objective is to do the opposite, to challenge oneself, find obstacles that challenge you and grow and develop through training on them.
So when parkour gyms started propping up, the most prevalent equipment that you would probably see is the trapezoidal box. Now, every parkour gym that I've ever seen videos of or been to has at least one of these still in place. Even though now everyone does innovate and create their own stuff, the trapezoid box is going nowhere. Besides this, one of the most frequent pieces of parkour equipment that has existed the test of time is probably your floor trainers. Now, they could be pieces of wood on the floor or small bars at floor level.
Where did parkour equipment and gyms start about?
I think parkour equipment and gyms started when the gyms first started propping up. They used to have these massive spaces with like these fixed setups that really simulated outdoor environments. So there'd be a huge setup of walls, high walls, low walls, amazing bar setups. But the limitation there was, one, you needed an airplane hangar kind of space, and two, your fixed setup once built could not be done anything with other than train on the same setup for years to come.
So when parkour people first started to train indoors, they actually looked to one of the few existing spaces that existed that could provide itself, which were gymnastics facilities. And a lot of the gymnastics equipment that was used to practice the skills, like the foam vaulter, or the balance beam, or the gymnastics bars, were some of the first parkour indoor equipments that were used. And even today, when you look at any parkour gym, you'll actually still see the artifacts of those in the kind of trapezoidal boxes that are used, which resemble the gymnastics vaulter. You'll see bars everywhere for swinging that sort of resemble the gymnastics bar. And you'll see a lot of blocks, short, flat blocks on the floor that are pretty similar to the gymnastics beam as well. So, when we started out, Rishi, where did we get our parkour equipment from?
That's a great question. Where can you buy parkour equipment? Nowhere. It doesn't exist in the greater sense. Everything that we needed to use, we had to design and build ourselves. There are a couple of options now if you're willing to shell out thousands of dollars for a particular box. I'm not going to take any names, but they do exist if you really want to spend that much on one box.
The issue was that nothing of the sort existed in India and therefore wasn't available in India. And so the challenge for us was to create, design and fabricate these things ourselves so that we could take the classes. And that's where our equipment journey began.
So the first challenge that we needed to overcome, which actually led us down this path of designing all of our equipment, was we don't have an airplane hangar kind of space. We started with a space that was barely 600 square feet. Now in that, to keep the environment challenging and new each time, became that we needed only modular equipment. We can't have a fixed setup. It's too small a space. So we started designing how can we make this innovative and different each time. Keep it exciting for the students who are coming year after year. And that's where this journey leads us.
So I think the interesting part is that the constraint forced us to come up with ideas and solutions that we wouldn't have had if we had the luxury of unlimited space and of course unlimited budget as well. So what you see now is a progression of a lot of the constraints and difficulties guiding our thought process and design process. So when we looked at our first indoor location in Andheri in 2019, the challenge that we had was that we had only about 600 square feet to work with, which in global parkour gym terms was minuscule. So we started with some very basic requirements for what we needed. We designed like one wall that we could climb up and down on. And we decided to go with as flexible a setup as we could. So for the vaults, we created a set of boxes that were trapezoidal in shape, but that could be moved around to any spot in the academy, so that you could design the walls to be wherever you wanted them to be for that particular session.
Besides this, we made one cuboidal bar structure fixed into the ground and using scaffolding clamps, we could then create more elaborate bar structures with the supporting structures around the academy.
Very quickly after that, we had this realization that why can't we connect everything to everything? And over time, we started developing the systems around these clamping mechanisms where we could take bars and connect them from any bar or wall to any box or other structure, which really allowed us to make an entirely different setup every day or every week, whatever we chose, in a way that was also interesting and a creative expression for us. Because it's like you're getting to design your own jungle gym as often as you want.
Now, leading up from this, we decided, okay, we are now pretty well set in our own space, but now if we wanted to take workshops outside of our space, can we build a setup there? And we started exploring more about how can we make self-stabilizing structures that are not dependent on the environment to provide structural integrity. And we started designing boxes that were heavy enough but mobile enough that could provide this structural integrity to the bar setups and expand from there.
It's been 5 years now since that time. And now if you look at any of the 6 academies that we have in Mumbai, you will see a wide variety of structures that we've now come to have as our standard, which we've tried to make sure covers every type of basic obstacle that you could encounter in the environment. So you will have low walls, you have high walls, you will have very, very sloping walls, you'll have very, very flat walls, you'll have a bunch of blocks on the floor, you'll have bars of various lengths and various angles, and all together in combination, a skilled setter can create an environment that will challenge any level of parkour practitioner that you have today.
So primarily, every time we saw videos of all of these European and American gyms, we'd get super jealous, like, why can't our space look like that? Why don't we get to train on things like that? Like, these high walls and bar setups that are so intricate that you can really explore your creativity. And that's where we came up with this, that we have to have an elaborate setup that can also be changed up so that the variability is there. And that's what you see in our setups that change on a weekly or a monthly basis.
Our most recent innovation was actually developing our latest series of equipment that was not just made for parkour professionals to use, but also could be used by anybody teaching in a home or a school with a set of very customer-friendly and user-friendly options where all of the heavy boxes that we needed strong people to lift and lug around now have wheels and can be lifted and dismounted with very little effort. And we know all our coaches are really happy about that, so they don't have to carry hundreds of kilos around the gym anymore.
Who built the equipment for us?
So initially, us having a very little idea of what we wanted to do and how it had to be done. Both Rishi and I have completely irrelevant fields of expertise. He was a doctor, so he cut people up, and I used to work in physics, so I had some background but nothing to do with manual labor.
Mostly theoretical.
Yeah, so we ended up doing what any random set of experimenters would do, which is we bought all the power tools we could get our hands on, and we experimented. So the first couple of boxes and walls, we ended up buying the wood and things ourselves. We used to do our own cutting, drilling and fixing to try to see what worked as part of the design process. Eventually, thankfully, we managed to get a set of like basic fabricators, metal and wood, who would help us in the routine activity once the design was developed. But as anybody who's worked with carpenters or welders knows, that doesn't mean you can sit back and relax. It has always been a very involved process to this day. And I'll tell you, 5 years down the line of developing parkour equipment, about once in 3 months, you will still catch Rishi painting a box or screwing something in. And you will find one of us running to a center to perform last minute repairs. Because the advantage of having done that in the past means we have the capability to fix all of this anytime we need.
One of our advantages, if looking back from this perspective, or disadvantages when we started off, was that we had no experience in the construction or engineering field at all. The advantage part is we didn't know what we couldn't or shouldn't do. So we experimented with things that others may or may not have done and came up with some really weird ideas of how things fit together. And you'd see that being implemented today, where something that has been used by many gyms have not been utilized in this particular way.
Okay, what's next in the equipment space?
So the things that we'd be working towards next is making ease of use for all of our equipment. There are still certain things that are still heavy. And I think the more we make it easy to set up and use, the more people will be willing to experiment and make more creative setups. The more effort it takes, obviously, you're disincentivized to make more setups.
And I think we're looking at a future where we want parkour equipment to be accessible to people who are not in the parkour space as well. We would love to see parkour gyms in every school, playground, and kids and adults having access to spaces where they can play and challenge themselves. And developing the manufacturing infrastructure to be at that scale is a whole other task. How has being in India affected parkour design?
I think India has this unique problem that is more or less prevalent in all of the Southeast Asian countries. That is, our spaces are the premium. We won't get very large spaces, or if you do get them, you get them on the outskirts of town, not in the urban centers themselves, where your audience and your clients are going to be. So a lot of our equipment now ends up being very modular and very movable. Otherwise, you cannot survive and you cannot keep them engaged for very long periods of time. So if you want to come and try out obstacles and obstacle course training in a space that doesn't make you drive 3 hours away, try out one of our centers.
And if you're a space or an institution that wants to build a next generation park or something that allows people to challenge themselves, reach out. We do a lot of custom orders and we're happy to make that happen.